If you're joining me in this video and have not seen my previous video, I highly recommend checking out part 1 of this series on the Sabah dispute after this. I laid the groundwork there, discussing the intertwined histories of the sultanates of Brunei and Sulu and how the Sultan of Brunei gifted a portion of what is now Sabah to the Sultan of Sulu. I left off with the arrival of British and the complex agreements that followed. In this video part 2, we'll delve deeper into that period, examining the role of the British North Borneo Company, the nuances of the agreements made with both sultans, and how differing interpretations of those agreements continue to fuel the ongoing dispute between Malaysia and the Philippines. So, if you're ready to unravel the complexities of this fascinating and crucial historical issue, let's get started. With their formidable naval power and established trading networks, the British began to exert their influence in Southeast Asia during the 19th century. Their interest in Sabah stemmed from the region's abundant natural resources, including timber and spices, which are highly valued commodities in global trading. This strategic interest in Sabah was part of a broader pattern of British expansion in the region, driven by economic ambitions and geopolitical considerations. So, imagine North Borneo, a land rich in resources, like a treasure chest waiting to be opened. In the late 1800s, this area, now called Sabah, was ruled by two sultans, the Sultan of Brunei and the Sultan of Sulu. However, a powerful company from Britain, the British North Borneo Company, or BNBC, had its eyes on this treasure. The BNBC, or I'll also refer to it as the British Company, wasn't like an army invasion. Instead, they made deals with the sultans. Think of it like making a trade. The British company offered money, a regular annual allowance to the sultans. This payment wasn't a one-time thing. It was a recurring payment, essentially a form of rent or subsidy, given to the sultans every year to grant the British company control over North Borneo. In return, the sultans gave the British company control over North Borneo. It wasn't a fair trade, though. The sultans got some money, but the British company got to run the whole show. These deals weren't simple. They were complicated, like a lengthy contract. The British company promised to pay the sultans this regular annual allowance, but they also got to make all the rules. They were like the new boss of North Borneo. They could appoint leaders, create laws, and collect taxes. Basically, they were in charge. And it wasn't just about running the government. The British company also got control of all the good stuff in North Borneo. The land, the trees, the minerals, everything. They could build farms, bring in people from other places to work, and make lots of money. This was good for the British company, but it wasn't always suitable for those who already lived there. Even though the deals discussed protecting the local people's rights, the British company often ignored them. They were so focused on making money that they sometimes didn't care about the local communities. The British North Borneo Company had so much power. They were like a mini country. They owned vast pieces of land, which they could rent or sell. They could dig up all the valuable resources, and they controlled all the buying and selling, ensuring they got a cut of every deal. Later on, Britain stepped in and made the North Borneo a British protectorate. This meant Britain was like a bodyguard for the BNBC, protecting them from other countries. But it also meant the British company had to listen to Britain slightly. Not everyone in North Borneo was happy with the British company. Some of the local communities fought back. They saw the British company taking their land and changing their way of life and weren't happy about it. So, what's the legacy of British company? it's complicated. They did bring some development to North Borneo, but they also caused many problems. They didn't always treat the local people fairly, and their focus on money sometimes hurt the communities. The story of the BNBC reminds us that even though deals and agreements sound good on paper, they can sometimes be unfair and have long lasting consequences. And it's important to remember that this annual payment to the Sultan didn't just disappear when the British left. When Malaysia became the Federation of Malaysia, the responsibility for those annual payments was handed over to the new Malaysian government. The year was 1941. Imagine Sabah, a land of lush rainforests and sparkling coastlines, suddenly plunged into darkness. The peaceful life its people knew was shattered as the roar of warplanes filled the sky. Japan had arrived, and the British North Borneo Company, who had been running Sabah, were no match for their forces. For the next 4 years, a heavy shadow fell across the land, the shadow of Japanese occupation. Life changed drastically. It wasn't just about the scary soldiers marching through villages. It was about survival. Food became scarce. Imagine going to bed hungry every night not knowing where your next meal would come from. Many people starved, their bodies weak and thin. The Japanese also tried to change the local people's way of life, but the spirit of the local people was strong. They held on to their traditions and their hope for a better future. Finally, in 1945, the war ended. The news spread like wildfire. Japan had surrendered. Joy mixed with relief swept through Sabah, but the scars of the occupation were deep. The land was damaged, and many lives had been lost. Sabah then became a British colony, meaning the British government directly ruled it. They began the long and challenging task of rebuilding, helping Sabah to heal from the wounds of war. The formation of Malaysia was a complex process that involved the merger of several different territories. In the early 1960s, the British government decided to grant independence to Southeast Asian colonies. This led to the formation of the Federation of Malaya in 1957, which was made up of the Malay states on the Malay Peninsula. In 1961, the British government proposed the formation of a larger federation that would include Singapore, Sabah, and Sarawak. This proposal was met with opposition from some groups who feared that the Malays would dominate the new federation. However, after a referendum in Singapore, most people voted in favor of joining the new federation. The Federation of Malaysia was officially formed on September 16, 1963. The new country was made up of the Federation of Malaya, Singapore, Sabah, and Sarawak. However, Singapore left the Federation in 1965 and became an independent country. The Philippines claimed that the Federation of Malaysia was against the agreement between the British North Borneo Company and the Sultan of Sulu stems from a disagreement over the interpretation of the 1878 agreement. The Philippines argues that the agreement was a lease, not a cession, meaning the Sultan of Sulu only granted the British North Borneo Company temporary control over the territory, not permanent ownership. When Malaysia was formed in 1963, it inherited the British North Borneo Company's rights and obligations, including the annual payments to the heirs of the Sultan of Sulu. However, Malaysia maintains that the 1878 agreement was a cession, meaning the Sultan of Sulu permanently transferred territory ownership to the British North Borneo Company. The Philippines argues that Malaysia, by claiming ownership of the territory, violates the original agreement, which the Philippines interprets as a lease. This agreement over interpretation of the 1878 agreement and consequently the status of Sabah has persisted between the Philippines and Malaysia since the formation of the Malaysian Federation. The issue remains a point of contention, impacting diplomatic relations and occasionally resurfacing in international forums. The Sabah dispute remains a complex issue with a long and contentious history. From its origin in the 19th century involving the Sultanate of Sulu through the period of British North Borneo and into the modern era, the question of sovereignty over Sabah has been a point of contention between Philippines and Malaysia. Numerous attempts to resolve the dispute have been made, but a lasting solution has yet to be found. One significant development occurred in 2013, following an incursion into Sabah by armed Filipino individuals claiming ties to the Sultanate of Sulu. This event significantly heightened tensions between the two nations. After this incursion, the Malaysian government discontinued the annual payments previously made, which they characterized as a symbolic gesture related to the historical claims. This decision further complicated the already delicate situation surrounding the Sabah dispute. The dispute continues to be a sensitive matter, with implication for regional stability and the relationship between the Philippines and Malaysia. While the historical claims and the events of 2013 remain significant, the ongoing need for peaceful dialogue and a mutually agreeable resolution is paramount. The people of Sabah, whose lives are directly impacted by this dispute, deserve a future free from uncertainty and the potential for further conflict. Thank you for watching. I hope this video has provided you with a better understanding of the history of the Sabah dispute. Please feel free to leave any questions or comments you may have below.